What's up, Daily Fab Gamers? I recently made a joke that Ian Holland should be banned so that I would receive his casting gigs, and while I was mostly kidding, I'm serious when I say that shoutcasting fab events is something I'd love to do. However, public speaking is hard, and casting isn't something I have experience with. I can do analysis well enough, but entertaining and informing an audience while deftly navigating my words is a different beast entirely, and so, why not add some variety to the channel while also practicing the craft? I'll be casting recently uploaded events from the comfort of my home, and I'm asking for your feedback. Let me know what I did right or wrong and how you think I can improve, keeping in mind that things I'll be focusing on are not tripping over my words, pepping up my speech so that I don't put you all to sleep, and adequately and accurately reflecting the game state while also giving some on-the-spot analysis. You can find a YouTube link to the professionally cast game in the video description below. You'll also find a link to my Patreon page where subscribers get access to my matchup guides for all my tournament decks and weekly bonus content, including draft reviews and deck techs. Want to tighten and optimize your gameplay in real life? Use the affiliate link in the video description below to buy your very own Codex journal, and be sure to use code LUPINE10, that's LUPINE10, at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Finally, Daily Fab Gameplay is brought to you in part by Hemel from The Bazaar. It's never been more affordable to play in flesh and blood. Players have been buying the cards they need from Hemel for years. I started buying from him in 2023 and have never found a better deal. The Bazaar's prices are the lowest for singles, full sets, and class sets, including new releases. High Seas singles and more are available now and ship both domestically and internationally. Message Hemel on Blue Sky, Discord, email, or Twitter to see what he can do for you. Now, let's get right into it. Welcome back, everyone, to this very exciting round 2 of day 1 of Pro Tour Singapore. This is being played in the High Seas meta. We have a very exciting gameplay between Yuki Liebender playing Arachne Slip Through the Cracks and Georgie DiCarlo piloting Florian Rotwood Harbinger. Very interesting matchup here. Florian has fallen by the wayside recently, not having a very good matchup into Gravy Bones, not having a very good matchup into Syndra Drakai of Retribution, two very popular heroes at the moment, but does have a very good matchup into Arachne Slip Through the Cracks, or Slippy. This is a targeted meta call to defeat this very popular assassin hero. It'll be on Yuki to pilot through the disruption, the block value, the defense reactions, and the arcane damage that Florian represents. If you want to see the list that Yuki is playing, very exciting. She has made that public. The deck list is in the video description below. You can also find a link to Yuki's Patreon on the bobble, where you can buy the matchup guide for Arachne. You can also buy a Slippy primer to help you get familiar with the deck if you are just picking it up for the first time, want to try it yourself. So I'm not going to yammer on anymore. We're going to get right into this game to see if Yuki has the strategy and the skills to overcome this matchup deficit into Florian, a hero that I'm assuming she wasn't expecting to see a lot of today. Over on Yuki's side of the board, we see that she is presenting AB1 Spell Void 1 in the form of Widow Web Crawler. This is going to let her pitch cards prevent the arcane damage from Florian's Rune Chants. On Florian's side of the board, we see a very standard loadout. Face Purgatory is going to be massive in helping to overcome any sort of big Bonds of Agony plays. The Face Purgatory effect will trigger before Yuki gets the opportunity to play attack reactions. If Yuki was counting on a reaction in hand to buff up the power of Bonds of Agony, or even just to push something like an Infect, any stealth attack over the top of blocks, Face Purgatory is going to interact with her ability to do so. On Georgie's side of the board, we see him play a life to gain a life, then, which is actually negated by the Reaping Blade, then pitch another Everbloom life to make a rune chant. Yuki starts with an Infiltrate. Slippy's hero power will give this go again. Infiltrate having 3 power and saying that if it hits, it banishes the top card of the opponent's deck, and Yuki may play that card until the end of her next turn. Looking at a Plow Under block from Georgie, let's see if Yuki has the reaction or if she is just going to move on to the next attack. With 3 cards in hand, this really could be anything. A reaction to get Infiltrate over the top of blocks. It could be a blue pitch to attack with a Hunter's Clave. It could be 2 red pitches to attack with a Hunter's Clave. But we do see a yellow Take Up the Mantle being pitched for Hunter's Clave, rather than being played on the Infiltrate to get it over the top of Plow Under. This very likely is a concession to pitch stacking. Take Up the Mantle can be extremely powerful in the late game if it is pitch stacked with Bonds of Agony, or if we just find it in second cycle, when Yuki has likely put a Bonds of Agony into her graveyard over the course of the game. It can also be used with Double Trouble as a way to push extra damage, or Tarantula Toxin and Kiss of Death. Yuki ends the turn with an Infect that gets covered by a second Plow Under from Georgie. This is a really good start for Yuki. Not leaking any damage is hit or miss, but the fact that 2 very powerful cards from Georgie have already been played, or rather have already been blocked with, is really, really nice for Yuki. Also, a mixed bag for Yuki. Georgie plays out Felling of the Crown. And while he does have the Earth Density in Graveyard to turn on the Decompose effect of Felling of the Crown, he does not have 4 Earth cards in Banish, so the Felling is only attacking for 4 rather than for 8. Yuki will need to give a card to the Felling Decompose effect, but could very likely afford to just take 4 damage from the actual attack power of the Felling and return a 4-card hand. Looking at what is in Yuki's hand, I believe I see a blue Double Trouble, a Justinic, and an Art of Desire body. That is the red stealth attack that draws a card and gains a life if it banishes a red from the top of the deck after hitting. Yuki says no blocks and says send me the bill, taking 1 Arcane from the Rune Chant and 4 from the Felling of the Crown. That is our first Felling. Yuki also bottoming Codex of Frailty, which is not only a good play for the late game when she may be looking to close the game out with Codex Command and Conquer, or Codex Leave No Witnesses, or even Codexing for a very late Bonds with the Take Up the Mantle that she just put onto the bottom of her deck at the end of her last turn. But Codex gets a lot worse against Earth Heroes when they have Felling of the Crown in their graveyard, as giving the Earth Hero another copy of their Felling is never really what we want to do. Yuki attacks with Double Trouble for 1 go again. Georgie gives that a full card in defense. In blue, Autumn's Touch. If Yuki breaks the chain, that will allow Georgie to decompose. Instead, Yuki does play Justinic. Let's see if she gives it another reaction. The onus is on her at this point to flick a knife, which, based on passing priority to Georgie, is something that she chooses not to do. Now that Georgie is covering 7 on this 6, let's see if she chooses to flick to get the Double Trouble power over to 8 and banish 2 cards from the top of Georgie's deck. She chooses not to, instead sending Pain in the backside for 3 go again, covered by Channel Mount Heroic. Georgie giving the last card in his hand to stop this Art of Desire body. Ending with no cards of his own, but Yuki has no cards to put in Arsenal. We have a full turn reset, sending it back to Yuki. Although the difference between this turn and last turn is that Yuki's Tunic is now online, which could allow her to attack with 2 Claves in a turn, or pitch a blue to attack with a Clave, then send Command and Conquer. Yuki has a lot of options enabled by this Fiendal Spring Tunic. Let's see how she chooses to utilize those options, sending another Double Trouble blue for 1 with Go Again. The Double Trouble text says that if 2 attack reactions are played or activated during its chain link, it will get +2 power. One of the big gifts that Mistveil gave to Assassin players, particularly Slippy, are blues that have the power and value of reds. So Double Trouble being a blue that can effectively attack for 3. Very strong here. Let's see if Yuki is going to give us the second reaction to get Double Trouble over the top of Grasp of the Arknight block. She chooses not to. So either Yuki is going to follow up with the Orb-Weaver Spinneret, which I do see in her hand, in order to make a Calicera, or she could just be thinking about leaving Florian marked for the next attack. It could be Mark of the Black Widow, but we do just see Yuki keeping priority and playing a Razor's Edge to get the Double Trouble over the top of that Grasp of the Arknight block, dealing 4 damage, dealing first blood to this Florian. And because the Double Trouble has hit, Florian is going to banish the top 2 cards of his deck. We see a Fruits of the Forest and a Condemned to Slaughter. So probably not the way that Yuki would have liked that to go, as Florian now moves up to a 4th Earth card in Banish, allowing him to get value out of Barkskin of the Millennium Tree and Well Grounded. However, Yuki also did not banish any meaningful Earth cards from the top of Florian's deck. If she had hit a Plow Under, a Felling of the Crown, maybe even a Command and Conquer, I could have seen her being much happier with that exchange. As it is, we do see Orb-Weaver Spinneret being played. This allows Yuki to send a Graphene Calicera for 4 rather than 1, using the Tunic to pay for it. Florian is not marked, so the Calicera will not have go again, but with Yuki only having 1 card in hand, that goes nicely into her arsenal. Very good use of her hand here, being able to convert 3 cards into arsenal the 4th. We're going to see how Georgie chooses to block this Calicera, if at all. Blocking the Calicera, always a risky proposition, as Tarantula Toxin can have both modes be active if the Calicera gets blocked, and based on how infrequently Florian needs to block, if this is a Tarantula Toxin, Yuki may choose to just use it and get value out of it, instead going for the arsenal play. With 2 cards, Florian is still very dangerous. Earth cards in graveyard, this could be a Felling of the Crown, it could be a Plow Under. In fact, it is second Felling, because Georgie has those 4 Earth cards in Banish. Felling already attacks for 8, but of course Georgie has more Earth cards in graveyard to put into Banish, which is going to give the Felling of the Crown actual text. Yuki is forced to bottom a card from hand. This also brings Florian up to 7, not enough to get the hero power online, but is enough that the next Decompose, be that a Felling of the Crown, a Plow Under, a Cadaverous Tilling, or even a defensive Rootbound Carapace, is going to be enough to turn the hero online. This is only turn 3. Florian has plenty of health. This likely not the speed at which Yuki would have liked to see Georgie be online. Florian has not played any Arcane Seeds, still has plenty of blues left to pitch to Grasp of the Arknight. This is going to be a long game and a tough slog for Yuki. Personally, I'm excited to see how she deals with all of this pressure. Bottoming a card to Felling, giving a full 8 block, saying the 3 cards that I have in my hand are not worth it, I will get more value by just preserving life total and waiting until Florian needs to take turns off. But for me personally, I want to know how often is Yuki actually pitching to the Widow Web Crawler Arcane Barrier. How is Yuki going to navigate what is a traditionally very difficult matchup? I'll be bringing Slippy to Calling Kansas City next week, so excited to see how this plays out. Returning to the game, Yuki sends full tempo back to Georgie. Georgie draws 3 reds and a blue. One of those reds is Felling of the Crown, so he does get to do something very powerful with this turn, but is going to have to lose one of the cards in his hand to do so. Needing to bottom a card to the Felling effect. We'll get to Arsenal, the last card. Yuki, of course, needs to bottom to the Felling of the Crown. 3 cards in hand, 1 card in arsenal. Let's see if she chooses to make the same play that she made last turn. Decides not to, keeping the full 3 cards in her hand and the card in arsenal, taking 8 points of damage. Notably, that is Georgie's last Felling. and he has had to decompose at least one of the fellings in order to power up the felling we just saw. Yuki sent Bonds of Agony for one go again. Easily the strongest play that Slippy has, holding back 3 cards. The fact that Yuki has Flick Knives on board is just a reaction. We're talking about Face Purgatory. I had mentioned earlier that Face Purg does put Yuki into a position where she may not be able to get the full value out of bonds that she wants to. Say she has a reaction in Arsenal. Say she doesn't have a reaction in Arsenal, has 2 reactions in hand. She needs to discard a card to the Face Purgatory effect, and if she doesn't have a reaction in Arsenal, then she is no longer able to use Bonds of Agony. She would need to discard a reaction from hand, and then would only have the reaction in hand and Flick Knives on board to get Bonds of Agony through. But we see her discard an Infiltrate. Here is the Flick Knives activation, throwing the Graphene Calicera, letting Yuki keep the Hunter's Clave. Florian remains unmarked. We see a Razor's Edge in hand and a Shred in Arsenal. So that is going to be the 3 reactions that Yuki needs to turn on Bonds of Agony. Neither Flick Knives nor Shred add power to the bonds. The power comes from Bonds' own effect, bringing it up to 4 power, and Razor's Edge bringing it up to 7. Now, Georgie is blocking 8 on this Bonds of Agony. Shred reduces the block value of the Condemned to Slaughter, bringing it down to total block value of 4. And with no defense reaction, Bonds is going to get 3 damage over the top, and Yuki will have the active Bonds effect. Now getting to look through Georgie's hand, picking a card from it, banishing that card, and all copies from the graveyard and deck. All of the copies up to 3. This is where Bonds can get very tricky. If Yuki banishes a red, she could take yellow copies from Georgie's deck, or blue copies. Maybe Georgie had a red Autumn's Touch in hand, and Yuki can banish blue copies. It also gets a little more interesting when we consider meld cards that Florian has. Say Georgie was holding onto an Arcane Seed's Life. Yuki could banish that and then banish copies of Everbloom Life, because the card that she would have chosen with Bonds is Life, not Arcane Seeds, or vice versa, not Everbloom. Instead, Yuki chooses Gravekeeping. This is an interesting card to see in Florian. I suspect this is really here for Gravy, maybe even Syndra, but does get some extra value against Slippy. 1 for 5 is just a fine rate. That is more off of a 2-card hand than we would see with Grasp of the Arknight Reaping Blade. Grasp of the Arknight into Gravekeeping represents a 2-card 7 when Florian is online. We also get extra value by banishing Codex of Frailty targets. Now, Yuki has not put a Command and Conquer or a Leave No Witnesses into her graveyard. We also have not seen Kiss of Death, but if Yuki had a single copy of Leave No Witnesses or a single copy of Command and Conquer, Gravekeeping, being able to banish that single copy greatly reduces the power of Yuki's Codexes of Frailty. Looking over at Georgie's hand, we see a blue Oath of the Arknight and a Trot Along. The Gravekeeping would have represented that 2-card 7, as I said. Instead, we have a much less powerful turn from Georgie, perhaps pitching the Trot Along to play Oath of the Arknight to make 2 Rune Chants and give the next Rune Blade attack +1 power, Reaping Blade, then comes in for 2 Arcane +4. Georgie wastes a resource over the course of that turn cycle and only presents the 2-card 6 instead of the 2-card 7. Yuki passes the turn, draws back up to 4. I can see another Bonds of Agony in that hand. I think that there's a Tarantula Toxin in there. We're going to see what Georgie does with his turn, how Yuki chooses to react. First pitching to Grasp of the Arknight, making 2 Rune Chants, and sending the Reaping Blade for 3. This represents the 2-card 5, choosing to take an intellect penalty by holding the Trot Along. At the same time, the Trot Along does allow for bigger hand conversion. If Georgie decides that he doesn't need to block whatever Yuki is doing, the Trot Along can give the Reaping Blade go again, then lead into a strong follow-up, perhaps Plow Under, Command and Conquer. Yuki takes the 2 arcane, pitches Art of Desire Mind blue to prevent the 2 arcane with Widowweb Crawler, and then blocks the Reaping Blade with Tarantula Toxin, going down to a 2-card hand. We know that she is holding a Bonds of Agony, also holding the first Leave No Witnesses that she has seen this game. This is going to threaten Georgie's arsenal and demand at least 2 cards. It could be Barkskin and Well Grounded. It could be Barkskin and a card from hand. It could be Well Grounded and a card from hand. We haven't seen any defense reactions from Georgie yet. Sink Below, Shelter, no Rootbound Carapace. So this could be a 1-card block from Georgie. We don't see a defense reaction in hand. Maybe there's one in Arsenal. We do see Seeds of Tomorrow in hand, which would be that 2-card answer. Bottom the Arsenal, prevent 5 points of damage. That would solve the Leave No Witnesses problem, but still end up giving us the 2 cards. Instead, we get a Grasp of the Arknight block with that Trot Along, covering 4 on the Leave No Witnesses. Yuki will Arsenal the Bonds of Agony and ship it back to Georgie. Looking at the hand, I can see a few reactions in there, including Spike with Blood Rot. Fandal Spring Tunic is up, which is going to pay for the Spike. We'll see if Yuki's going to go for the Bonds of Agony line. Over on Georgie's side of the board, pitching that Seeds to play Channel the Millennium Tree, then pitching a blue to Grasp of the Arknight. Millennium Tree's AMP 3 does benefit the Rune Chant. So Swarming Gloomveil coming in for 4 with Go Again. Georgie having made 3 auras this turn between 2 Rune Chants, and Barkskin, if Yuki gets hit by the Swarming Gloomveil, she will not be able to prevent any further arcane damage this turn. However, with Georgie only having 1 floating resource and no cards in hand, there is no more arcane damage coming in this turn. Overall, this represents 9 points of damage from the Arcane and the Swarming Gloomveil, and then 3 more points of damage from the Reaping Blade for a total of 12. If Yuki chooses to take all of that damage, she will be 18 points behind her opponent, with a big Bonds turn to try to make miracles happen. Yuki pitching Persuasive Prognosis to prevent 2 points of arcane damage, 1 from the Rune Chant, 1 from the other 4 damage Rune Chant, now taking 3 points of damage. Let's see if she chooses to block the Swarming Gloomveil. She does not, taking 4, and then taking 3 from the Reaping Blade. Turning the Prognosis into 2 points of value rather than 3, I suspect is a play towards Fatigue. I'll be interested to see if that's what she ends up going for here as her way to win this game, where she is 16 points down. Without this Millennium Tree, she could potentially fatigue the Florian. That said, Florian is very difficult to fatigue, having a 1-card 5 in pitching a blue to Grasp of the Arknight, then following up with the Reaping Blade for 3. Bonds of Agony played by Yuki Lee Bender here, 1 with Go Again with the Tunic. We see a Spike with Blood Rot in hand. We know that she is holding a Take Up the Mantle, and she has the Flick Knives on board. This Bonds is active if she wants to make it so. However, depending on how Georgie blocks, Yuki could also choose to let the Bonds go without any reactions and move on to the next stealth attack. And because she has Flick Knives to mark Florian at instant speed and a copy of Bonds of Agony in the graveyard, the next stealth attack can also represent Bonds. That proposition gets a little harder as Georgie is wearing his Well Grounded at instant speed, can destroy the Well Grounded to prevent 2 points of damage. Now, Georgie has really committed to blocks here. We are looking at a channeled Millennium Barkskin of the Millennium Tree generates 2 embodiments of Earth, meaning this Trot Along is blocking for 5. With a Command and Conquer and an E-Strike, that's blocking for a total of 11. Georgie is holding 1 card back. So this is what I mean. If Georgie is really going to commit to blocks here, Yuki just says no reactions, let's move on to the next thing. Now we're looking at Art of Desire Body. This is 3, does not have Go Again, but would banish the top of Georgie's deck if it hits, Instead, Georgie doesn't give the well-grounded, instead choosing to be marked by Yuki's last clave. That is going to let Yuki take up the mantle, banish Bonds of Agony, which will replace the Art of Desire body, then use the tunic to play Spike with Blood Rot. We're looking at Bonds for 10 with an on-hit Blood Rot that is now active. If Georgie isn't holding a defense reaction or something to discard or play at instant speed, he's going to lose this card in his hand and all copies from his deck. He also takes 10 points of damage from the Bonds of Agony. Very curious why he chose not to break the well-grounded there to prevent the damage from the clave. Now, Yuki still would have had an out. She would have been able to still play both of these reactions. Take Up would have been +2. Tunic Spike would have been +3 for a total of 8. If she hits a red off the top of the deck, she gains a life, draws a card for the arsenal. Instead, because she hit and banishes a Rune Rager Swarm, she is able to banish up to 3 copies from the hand, deck, and graveyard. We see a blue Rune Rager Swarm taken from the deck so far. We'll see if she can find another copy of the card to take. She does have the 1 copy remaining that she is allowed to banish, though it does appear that Georgie was only running 1 copy of red, 1 copy of the blue in deck, and no copies remaining in the graveyard. So not full value from the Bonds, but taking Georgie's entire hand, leaving Georgie without the ability to maintain that Channel the Millennium Tree, and getting full tempo back on her side of the board has to feel pretty good at this point. That is the big break that Yuki needed to make up that big life gain deficit. The Blood Rot Pox token going to bring Georgie even closer to Yuki's life total, as he cannot pay the 3 at the end of his turn. Yuki is going to start the turn with tempo at a life deficit of 3 rather than the deficit of 15 that she had to start off this next turn. 1 copy of Bonds of Agony in graveyard, 1 copy of Bonds in banish. That cannot be taken up anymore. What is more pressing for Yuki at this point is that she currently does not have any daggers, and that is potentially very bad for Arachne Slip Through the Cracks. We see what I believe is a hand of all reds, so not that Yuki would have been pitching to the daggers anyway, given the quality of this hand. However, not even a Calicera is going to present some potential intellect penalties. 2 Leave No Witnesses and a Command and Conquer is already not where she wants to be. No Go Again in this hand. Pitching 2 Leave No Witnesses to attack with Command and Conquer, a 3-card 6 is exactly what Georgie needs in this position to come back from that very devastating Bonds of Agony. 2 Leave No Witnesses going to the bottom of the deck is not a huge problem for Yuki. She does have a copy of Leave No in the graveyard for potential Codex of Frailties. Over on Georgie's side of the board, we see his first Rootbound Carapace on turn 8, and it lines up very poorly with the Command and Conquer. Georgie blocking with Canopy Shelter, preventing 2 points of damage, taking 4, but making 2 Might tokens on the back end. Let's see what he's going to do with the 2 cards in his hand that he presumably wants to pitch. Oath of the Arknight being pitched into Grasp of the Arknight to make 2 Runejant tokens. Following up with Swarming Gloomveil for 2 Arcane plus 6 Go Again. Very strong start. A 2-card 8 here, followed by the Reaping Blade for a 2-card 11 is a very, very good line. Yuki takes the 2 Arcane, it goes down to 13. Let's see, is she going to commit any cards to blocking here? She can easily give 2/3 blocks to prevent all of the damage from Swarming Gloomveil. I do see an Orbweaver Spinneret in her hand. Very important for making that dagger, making sure that she has something that she can pitch to. But the rest of the hand just doesn't really line up for it. Razor's Edge and Spike with Blood Rot can't be played on a Graphene Calicera. The Savor Bloodshed is nice, a lot less nice now that Yuki cannot mark her target, but with Tunic being down and Yuki only having these 2 cards in hand, even if she plays the Orbweaver Spinneret, she cannot also play Savor Bloodshed and pitch to attack with the Calicera. Choosing to take 3 damage from the Reaping Blade, going down to 10, Tunic goes up to 2. Presumably, Yuki will play the Orb Weaver Spinneret, then follow up with a stealth attack from her arsenal. Let's see if she has the stealth attack, and she does. We have our first Kiss of Death of the game. Coming in for 6 go again. On hit, Georgie loses 1 point of life. So this represents 7 points of damage overall. Yuki does not play the Saber Bloodshed, which would have let the Kiss of Death come in for 10 with go again. We'll see what she's going to do with the Saver. She has a couple of very good lines. If she arsenals the Saver, Tunic will be up at the start of her next turn, letting her present a 1-card 5 with the Saver, Tunic, and Calicera. She could also pitch the Saver to attack with the Calicera for 1, giving her an opportunity to Flick Knives the Kiss of Death to deal 2 more points of damage. Getting 6 points of block out of the second half of Barkskin of the Millennium Tree and this Oath of the Arknight that now blocks 4/5. Yuki does pitch the Saver, comes in with Calicera for 1 with the Flick Knives activation on Kiss of Death. We're looking at a total of 3 points of damage, bringing Georgie down to a potential 11, but we have a discard of Haunting Rendition, which is going to prevent not only the Calicera damage, but the potential damage of flicking the Kiss, and makes 2 rune chants on the back end because that damage was prevented. Yuki passes with no cards to Arsenal, drawing back up to 4. Tunic is going to be up at the start of her next turn. So at minimum, she gets to 0-card Calicera. Let's see what she can afford to keep with the Calicera here. We know Georgie has the Rootbound Carapace and Arsenal. He is holding on to 2 cards in hand. Let's see what he's got going on with those 2 cards. We have an Enlightened Strike coming down for presumably 7. Yes, 2 rune chants will put Yuki down to 8. Yuki then snap blocks with Infiltrate and Command and Conquer. Pitching Take Up the Mantle to prevent 2 points of damage from the 2 rune chants, then blocking the E-Strike for 7 for 6, taking 1 point overall and arsenaling the last card in her hand. On Georgie's side, I believe we're looking at 1 more copy of Plow Under, which would get around the Crown of Providence, but 2 copies of Command and Conquer, which Yuki is able to use the Crown of Providence to bottom the arsenal and draw a new card. Georgie has a Rootbound Carapace rotting in his arsenal, so he may not be able to fully convert her hand, and perhaps that is what Yuki is playing around here. We also see Georgie holding a copy of Rootbound Carapace, which he very likely is not able to play. He can play the Arcane Seed's Life, make 4 rune chants, gain no life because of the power of Reaping Blade. The fact that he is higher on life means that he will not benefit from the life half of Arcane Seed's Life. Then following up with 6 rune chants and Reaping Blade for 3. Yuki really showing the power of Widow Web Crawler here, making me feel very excited to add that to my personal Florian sideboard. Preventing all 6 of the Arcane and giving an Art of Desire body to block out the Reaping Blade. On Yuki's side, we have the Orb Weaver Spinneret, creating a second Graphene Calicera, and Yuki being able to cash in the Final Spring Tunic to attack for 4 with Go Again. Without knowing what this last card in Yuki's arsenal is, this might be the end of the turn. However, we only saw that 1 Codex of Frailty at the start of the game that Yuki pitched. Maybe this card in Arsenal is a Codex of Frailty. Georgie playing the Rootbound Carapace from Arsenal, finally being able to actually clear out that Arsenal, but big blowout in Tarantula Toxin. Both modes are active on the Calicera. We've got Calicera attacking for 7 now over the top of Georgie's block of 1. We know that Georgie did have a Rootbound Carapace in the last hand that I believe he took an intellect penalty for, so perhaps he could play that out here, get full value from it. Instead, choosing to take 6, going below Yuki Lee Bender for the first time in a while on life total. That is going to let him get full value from discarding a Fruits of the Forest or playing Arcane Seed's Life. Let's see if he is going to make use of that lower life total. pitching a blue fruit into Grasp of the Arknight to make 2 Rune Chants, then following up with the Arcane Seed's Life. So this is going to get a full 5 points of value, making 4 Rune Chants, and gaining Georgie a point of life, putting him back up to 9. Coming in with Enlightened Strike. This could be for +2. It could also be for draw a card. It's going to be for go again. Georgie does have that remaining resource that is going to enable a Reaping Blade. 6 arcane damage, followed by 5 physical damage, followed by 3 physical damage for a total of 14. Yuki does need to prevent at least 6 damage here to not be dead, and probably wants to prevent a little more to give herself a life buffer to not need to immediately pitch to any future Rune Chants. See how she's going to navigate this turn. Still waiting on a Codex of Frailty to try to catch her up with something like a Command and Conquer or Leave No Witnesses. At the same time, Georgie does still have Felling of the Crown in his graveyard, so Codex of Frailty likely not the most impressive thing that Yuki could be doing on this turn. But with Georgie sitting at 9, having no armor block remaining, and only the 2 points of prevention from Well Grounded, Yuki could be looking at a situation where all she needs to do is put 1 more big Bonds of Agony turn together. She should still have 1 copy of Just a Nick in the deck, might have 2. I know she played 1. I don't remember if she pitched the other one that she saw or if she blocked with it. We see Yuki's hand is 4 reds, which is terrible for preventing this arcane damage. She is going to pitch 2 reds to prevent 2 of the arcane, taking 4 down to 5. There is the second Just a Nick being covered with Crown of Providence to fully block out the Enlightened Strike, and blocks the Reaping Blade with Kiss of Death. Ending the turn at 5, giving full tempo back to Georgie, letting the Tunic tick up, but Yuki is in a very bad position here. Georgie maybe draws a hand that doesn't fully convert. We've seen that a few times this game, and if the most he can do with his turn is present 5 damage with Grasp of the Arknight Reaping Blade, that gives Yuki the freedom to keep 4 cards and try to convert those. However, if Georgie finds the last copy of Arcane Seed's Life, or a big attack like Enlightened Strike, Command and Conquer, even Plow Under, that could put Yuki into a spiraling position where she needs to keep fully devoting cards to defense and can never mount an offense of her own. Georgie starts the turn, pitching a blue into Grasp of the Arknight, making 2 Rune Chants. On his side, we see Command and Conquer, Channel the Millennium Tree, and Sink Below. We have the CNC follow-up. 2 Rune Chants, followed by 6 physical, and arsenaling a Sink Below is very good for Georgie in any position that Yuki's in that isn't pitching a blue, attacking with a Calicera, playing Codex of Frailty, and playing Command and Conquer. For Yuki's position, we see her pitch that Codex of Frailty to prevent the 2 arcane damage. Command and Conquer needs to be given at least 1 card for Yuki not to die. We did see the blue and the Codex that would have let Yuki Calicera Codex CNC. We'll see what she's going to do instead. If she can just preserve life total, set up an arsenal, and maybe catch Georgie on a turn where he can't fully commit his hand, that gives her the flexibility to take tempo back, hopefully strip some cards from Georgie, and maybe be able to get herself back into this game. As it is, her situation is not good, but it isn't dire. She has some space, and based on the hand we see from Georgie, he has very little going on this turn. Seeds of Tomorrow, Rootbound Carapace, I'm blanking on the new blue, Everbloom Life, and Flourish are not the cards that Georgie needs to make anything out of this turn. The best he can do with this is Grasp Reaping Blade, and that is exactly what Yuki is looking for. Now, Georgie's hand preserves life. It prevents damage very well. We've got a Sink Below and Arsenal. That Sink can be bottomed with Seeds of Tomorrow if Yuki ends up finding the Command and Conquer. The Seeds of Tomorrow prevents 5. Georgie has a Rootbound Carapace in hand, so his hand is very good at preventing incoming damage, but it is not very good at dealing damage, and that maybe gives Yuki the space to mount a counterattack. Codex of Frailty, Pick Up the Point, Mark of the Black Widow, and Double Trouble are what Yuki is looking at as a way to try and mount an offense of her own. I don't know what the card in Arsenal is. We have to hope, for Yuki's sake, that it is something she can easily clear from the arsenal to make room for Codex of Frailty. That Seeds of Tomorrow is going to make Codex of Frailty very troublesome for Yuki, as it will allow Georgie to clear his arsenal at instant speed and put a Felling of the Crown back in it. We'll see how Yuki is going to utilize that Codex, as she chooses not to pitch it. Instead, is going to hold on to it, presumably to play. Yuki starting the turn with Double Trouble for 1 go again. She has the Flick Knives as a way to react for Double Trouble, as well as clear out a Calycera to make room for Pick Up the Point to retrieve a Hunter's Clave. Going to be very helpful for marking Georgie in the future to set up for more Mark of the Black Widow, as well as the Take Up the Mantle that we know is coming back to the top of Yuki's deck within the next few turns. We'll see if Yuki has another reaction for this Double Trouble. Georgie choosing to play a Rootbound Carapace, blocking 4 on 1. That is going to give Yuki a little more information for her to decide if she wants to react here, or does she want to wait? No, we have a Just a Nick. Just a Nick is not only going to give +5 to the Double Trouble, but it will enable the text of Double Trouble, bringing it up to 8 total power. Georgie choosing to play the Sink Below rather than use Seeds of Tomorrow is going to fully cover the 8. Let's see, is he going to use the Sink Below effect? He is not, instead holding 3 cards. Yuki follows up with Pick Up the Point, using the Tunic resource to pay for the retrieve, picking up a Clave, and with 1 card left in hand, with the action point, we are looking at a Codex of Frailty. Now, this is very interesting on Georgie's side of the board, as he has committed 3 of his 5 cards to defending Yuki's incoming damage, which means Yuki can play Codex of Frailty, pick up Leave No Witnesses. Yes, Georgie can discard a card, get back Felling of the Crown, then block with a 3-block or a 2-block, and use Well Grounded to protect the Felling in Arsenal. But because he committed so many cards to defense, he won't be able to actually play the Felling, and that is going to give Yuki tempo with a full 5-card hand after she ponders a card into her arsenal, then draws 4 at the start of the end of her turn. With this Codex of Frailty, let's see what Yuki wants to get. It is, in fact, Leave No Witnesses. With no other cards in hand, I had to imagine that it wasn't going to be something like a Kiss of Death. We are simply sending 4 points of damage at Georgie and seeing whether he is able to cover it after he discards to the Codex of Frailty effect. Discarding a Fruit of the Forest is going to let Georgie use the Seeds of Tomorrow, bottom the Felling, put it back in his deck, and prevent the 5 points of damage from Leave No Witnesses. However, while he does get to keep his Well Grounded, this puts him into an even worse position against Yuki going into the start of her next turn, as she is holding a 5-card hand with full tempo, and Georgie does not have an easy 2-card play he can make by just holding a blue and then sending the Felling from Arsenal. We'll see what Yuki is going to do with her tempo. Notably, she does have that Hunter's Clave available, being able to flick to mark her opponent at instant speed. That play is not necessarily great, as Georgie does still have the Well Grounded, could use it to prevent the mark from Hunter's Clave and Flick Knives. But we'll see if that's what he actually wants to do with it. Is that what Yuki wants to do? She is holding on to a Tarantula Toxin, a Take Up the Mantle, and a Savor Bloodshed, meaning that she does still have a very fine turn. after flicking the clave if it does get blocked out, or prevented with the well-grounded, or I believe I saw a shelter from the storm in Jersey's hand. Very curious to know how he's planning to navigate a potential Bonds of Agony or Kiss of Death line here. The fact that he could have prevented himself from getting marked but chose not to is very interesting to me, and this isn't the first time we've seen that this game. We've seen that earlier, take up the mantle into Bonds of Agony, that dealt 10 damage and took Jersey's turn. That could have been prevented by the well-grounded. We are also now seeing a second take up the mantle line. Yuki's going to need to decide how to manage it. Is it going to be take up into Bonds? Does she have the third reaction to turn Bonds on? Or is it just going to be Kiss of Death, which in this case represents lethal damage, 6 damage from the kiss, and 1 damage from the on-hit effect. She's also holding Tarantula Toxin, which would be a way for her to not only bring the kiss up to 9 if Jersey, 9 period, but if Jersey then plays out a defense reaction to cover the damage from kiss, Tarantula Toxin is going to reduce the block value of that defense reaction by 3, which will give Yuki 9 power attacking over 1 defense. We have the Take Up the Mantle being used to pull Kiss of Death. So Yuki representing lethal damage currently. We'll see how Jersey's going to respond to that. Notably, Flick Knives has already been used this turn. Yuki cannot flick this kiss during the next combat chain link in order to deal 2 points of damage. Jersey is out of the woods on that. But with that Tarantula Toxin, Jersey is going to need to commit multiple cards to not getting killed by the 9 power Kiss of Death. Even then, it's going to have to be 2 4-block defense reactions, and Yuki still has a follow-up because Kiss of Death has go again, and Yuki will be able to set up an arsenal. So we know that Jersey is going to need to commit 3 cards to stopping this turn from killing him, which means that on his turn, I believe he still has a card. Yes, he would still have a card in hand. The most he can do is 5 points of damage between Grasp of the Arknight and Reaping Blade. And that is something that Yuki can deal with, then respond with her own 3 or even 4 card hand. Jersey in a very difficult position right now, needing to decide how to deal with this Kiss of Death for 6 go again. We have a well-grounded finally being used to prevent 2 points of this incoming 6 points of damage. Jersey is going to take 4 and lose a 5th point of life, going down to 2. Yuki now has 3 cards with which to navigate the rest of this turn. Because Jersey did not present a blocking card, Yuki choosing to hold on to the Tarantula Toxin, which now gives her a very interesting opportunity. She can play the Safer Bloodshed, giving her Calistera +4, pitch the Mark of the Black Widow in order to attack for 5, and have this Tarantula Toxin that will be active. Jersey needs to put cards from hand in front of the Calistera on blocks. After he does, the Tarantula Toxin is going to shred the defending card and buff the Calistera up to a total of 8. This should spell the end for Jersey DiCarlo unless he is somehow able to put a 3-block and 2 4-block defense reactions in front of the Calistera. Currently blocking with Canopy Shelter. Blocking for 2, generating 2 Might tokens. This is still lethal damage. Having to play Shelter from the Storm, and this is going to be enough to prompt a fist bump. Yuki Liebender wins the game, takes it down over Jersey DiCarlo. Very, very well played game from Yuki Liebender. Really have to respect the patience with which she navigated this game. There were a lot of hands that she chose to aggressively prevent arcane damage. There were multiple turns that she just put her entire hand on the table on defense, letting the 2 players reset, counting on Jersey's Florian deck to really let him down. And as we saw, he found a hand of 2 defense reactions, damage mitigation, Everbloom Life, and a Flourish that turned into what was ultimately a 5-card 5 That gave Yuki the space she needed in order to finally take down the game. Very impressive performance from Yuki Liebender. I will personally be adding Widow Web Crawler into my Florian matchup plan, specifically based on what I've seen here. I hope you enjoyed this game. I hope you enjoyed my casting of it. Be sure to use the comment section below to leave any feedback, criticism, praise. As I said, Yuki's deck list and the Patreon post to the matchup guide and the Slippy primer is also in the video description. I will also put the link to the official Flesh and Blood TCG Pro Tour Singapore Day 1 video in case you want to hear actual professional casters cast this game and get their insights as well. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next time I see you on Daily Fab Gameplay, take care.